Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the princess of the Fire Nation and got harem? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Seeing Ty Lee in motion was always a wondrous thing to see. How graceful and athletic her movements were and how miraculously quiet she could be when she chose to be. It was as if she could literally walk on air with how nimbly she was walking along the steel floor. Naruto approached her, asking her where Azula was, and she pointed him in the direction of where she last saw her. The Fire Nation princess informed Ty Lee that she was retiring early tonight as she wanted to think about some things. In fact, Azula was currently meditating, surrounded by candles that were rising and falling as she breathed in and out simultaneously. She was trying to make sense of everything she had learned over the past few days while relaxing her mind. While Azula was raised to be a perfectionist, Naruto's teachings and kindness had tempered her. She began thinking back to the moment when Naruto had transitioned from bodyguard to friend. With her mother gone, there was no one else that could do her hair the way she liked it. The way the servants did it was far from her liking, and of course her father couldn't be bothered with such a trivial manner. Azula hadn't realized how much she'd like the way mom did it, with the oils and perfumes and patient gentle combing, until it was gone. After mom left, everything had been too fast and too rough. That was until Naruto had taken over. It took him a few times, but Naruto eventually picked up on how to brush the way her hair mother used to. His gentle and playful and reverie was a sharp contrast to the silent and nervous fumble of the servants who would try and brush her hair. 0. A gold coin for your thoughts. Naruto asked as he entered the chamber. Hello Naruto, is there something you need? Azula asked, opening her eyes as Naruto sat on the soft silk sheets of her bed. I was wondering, how much about the war do you know, I mean besides the Fire Nation perspective? There is only so much I can tell you. To be honest, I never gave it much thought beyond what I was taught. Year after year, fresh new faces marched out to carry on their duty as the soldiers found themselves cheered on by the crowds as they carry on with the Fire Nation's campaign. Can you honestly endorse everything that's going on? The senseless pillaging and killing. The loss of an entire culture over a senseless campaign of death and destruction. I mean, surely the Fire Nation could have spread its culture without the senseless killing. Azula paused as she began reflecting on Naruto's words. In another time she would have been affronted by Naruto's words and strike him down for speaking against the glory of her nature, but this young woman had her heart tempered by the man's kindness. Azula studied Ty Lee's movements closely as the latter twisted in the air, her braid flipping around as she performed an aerial somersault. Ty Lee straightened just as she began to descend, bending her knees to absorb the impact. After a momentary pause, Ty Lee stood upright again and bowed. That's how it's done, Ty Lee smiled at Azula. Naruto and Mai were training in the background, the former instructing her in the use of projectiles. Azula had rebuffed Naruto's offer as the training Naruto was offering had no applications that would help in her firebending. My turn, Azula declared. She was confident she could replicate Ty Lee's movements perfectly. After all, she was a firebending prodigy who mastered many difficult forms. Her body was limber and toned, inasmuch as an 8-year-old's could be. As Ty Lee tried to warn her friend about how to perform the move correctly, Azula merely waved off the concern. Ty Lee had submissively sat down on the ground as Azula took a spot where she could begin her run. When Azula judged her speed was great enough, she launched herself into the air. As her feet left the ground, Azula began to pull herself inwards. She was able to complete one somersault before she realized she misjudged her height and would hit the ground. Azula! Ty Lee's cries had drawn Naruto's attention. He shot forward with great speed and threw his arm out to catch her as she was about to hit the ground. You alright, little princess? He asked as Ty Lee let out a relaxed exhale. I would have managed it, Azula forced out. Her knees felt weak as she realized she was alright. Of course, but I wouldn't be a good bodyguard if I allowed my charge to get hurt, now would I? So much had changed since then. Do you really believe if the Fire Nation had managed to conquer everything that you'll find peace and prosperity? There will always be revolts and people who will resent the actions of your nation. That this world unity that your nation is pursuing only leads to peace for them and no one else. During the course of this time, you're telling me that the Earth Nation hasn't given any reasons for peace. It's been close to a century, and I don't see how any decent leader could accept this state of turmoil for their subjects. Offers of surrender and compromise were repeatedly ignored for the last decade. The Earth King dismissed all of our offers of peace as he sits upon his throne in his high-walled city while his people starve around him. Every envoy had their body returned in a box, but that does pose a concern. It is what you brought to my attention earlier. The Avatar will most likely ally himself with the Earth Nation, and that might give them the edge to fight us on even ground. The Avatar is too idealistic to realize the revenge that the two remaining nations would want to bring down on us. There is a chance that Water Tribe and the Earth Nation might unite against us to placate their need for vengeance. I won't ignore the fact my people have taken many innocent lives, so who's to say they won't do the same in return. Slowly but surely Azula was becoming disillusioned by the all-encompassing pride of being a royal member of the Fire Nation that blinded her for so long. Her father's ideals and Naruto's teachings had waged inside her mind. Her desire for perfection and order made her question all this senseless chaos and what would be left for her to rule if everyone kept killing each other and destroying the nations. The people of this nature is suffering and something needs to be done. New leadership needs to take the reign of these nations. Despite the epiphany, the Fire Nation princess was still hesitant. From an early age she was taught that all one needed was pride and power. She had experienced so much that showed that her father's teaching were flawed, as Naruto was living proof of a powerful person who was compassionate. "I'll give you way more of a try," she said, taking his hand as he hoisted her up. "What do you have in mind?" "I heard about several groups of warriors and other rebels making their way to the Earth Kingdom. The thing is, we can ambush them and steal their identities and sneak into the Earth Kingdom and head off the Avatar. Essentially we would be killing several birds with a single stone." The following morning Naruto and the Foxy Vixens, as he took to calling them, much to Azula's annoyance and Mai's dismay, though Ty Lee seemed to like it, they had gathered outside a forest as they readied themselves to track down the group of warriors that Sho spent the night tracking. "So are you even sure that we can even use their disguises? I really hope you aren't going to have us running around all day, only to find out we can't use the identities of any of the groups we managed to run into too." "Now come on now, my cute little student, have you no faith in me?" Naruto asked, a mock face of sadness on his face. "I'm sad now, I think I need to hug and snuggle for a few minutes," he said, extending his arms and wriggling his eyebrows. "Ugh, you're such a pervert," Mai said as she turned her face as she did not see the grin on the blonde. "It's because I'm your student that I know not to have that much faith in you." Naruto let out a mirthful chuckle. "Oh come on now Mai-chan, you're just too easy to tease," he said in between his laughter as he saw Mai give him a small smile in return along with Ty Lee. "So I hope you girls are ready. The plan is to cover a lot of ground today. Now you three go on ahead and I cover the rear." He corrected himself only to dodge a fireball. Meanwhile, with Nai and Sen had managed to track the Avatar who was crossing the Serpent's Pass. On found himself looking into the eyes of the beast that was lurking in the waters of the Serpent's Pass as he found the reasons why the pathway was named as such. He then saw that Katara made a path of ice with her water bending to save their new friends, consisting of the Kaioshin warrior Suki, who outside her Kaioshin warrior geisha modeled outfit, and along with the pregnant Ying and Ton, a young married couple. They tried to cross the path that would bring them one step closer to Ba Sing Se. The child airbender then knew that he had to protect them to get back on Katara's good side. Since the incident back in the desert, she just seemed to put a little distance between them. Though he did try to ask many times on why she was being like this toward him, he would never get a straight answer from the girl in general, and it did annoy him slightly. Katara then saw a chance to hopefully delay the giant serpent as she froze a part of the beast's body that is still in the water. Which did not really pan out as the beast just freed itself with no effort on its part. It was here that the Water Tribe's girl saw that she stood no chance against the ocean beast. Meanwhile, further out the ocean was the Yin and Yang clones path were riding on top of a giant turtle. They took side of the Avatar group. The original said they couldn't have fun after all. The Gong were becoming tired of defending their new friends, while at the same time getting them across the frozen waters. Katara then was starting to feel a bit fatigued as she was using every water-bending skill she had not to kill the beast, but to drive it away from them and get some much-needed rest before going to Ba Sing Se. However, it did not seem that luck was not really on her side as she saw the giant serpent was going to slam its large tail on her. Only for the force of the blow to knock back the beast a few feet by Ong as he fell back into the deep waters before resuming its attack. Only for a pink blur to collide with the body of the giant serpent, and using this one chance, Ong along with Katara made their way back to their friends where it was safe for them once again. However, the moment they reached land once more, a loud roar was heard behind them as a giant three-headed serpent towered over the guardian creature of the path. The Gong then turned around to see Nai and San, who were sitting on one of the high grounds, the latter was sitting cross-legged with a silly grin and the former with a cold and calculating indifference. They could easily be mistaken for brothers, one with black hair and pale skin with the opposite adorning pale with hair and dark eyes with tanning skin. "We are the second and third extension of Lord Naruto's will." The more serious of the two spoke. "In other words, it's our turn to have fun with you." The other chirped childishly as his twin had to resist the urge to face palm. Meanwhile, with Copy Naruto and June, they were in a forest tracking down the scent of his descendant. "Different time? Are you serious?" June asked in disbelief, despite the growing amount of evidence that would support the blonde's theory. "Yeah, well, unless you have a better theory, there isn't much I can tell you anyway. How are we doing on the distance from our target?" She's quite a bit of distance from our current position. I would say about several villages over and maybe the expanse of a small region. I have to say you're pretty damn lucky to have the person you're searching for on this side of the continent," she said as Nyla hopped over a fallen tree. "Well, like I said, I'm still trying to get used to the general area. If you wish, I might be able to teach you some of my techs, the minor ones in fact. I've researched a seal that will force my chakra into a person's body and help them awaken their chakra system. I mean, people can bend an element, so it means they have the potential to use chakra in some form." The two of them continued talking as they continued covering more and more distance. June then looked to Nyla, who saw the first start to frizzle. "Looks like we have some company. We might have bandits in the area. If you don't mind, I wish to check to see if any of them are the bounties I have been tracking," June informed him, bringing out a scroll that showed a group of men along with 16 more with him. "This is without a doubt one of the largest hauls I've had, and I wouldn't mind a little help. Since you've been so kind to aid me, despite being paid and all, I guess it would rude of me to ignore a lady's request. Count me in. But those strange skills of yours could come in handy. If anything, you are quite distracting," she stated as an amused smirk formed on her face. In response to her teasing statement, Naruto pouted. "Well, geez, thanks for the vote of confidence," he grumbled as they arrived at a small camp where the bandits were staying for the night, as all of them looked a bit drunk while the others were just plain asleep. Seeing this opportunity, June whispered into the blonde's ear, saying that they have to quietly take out the still unconscious drunks. Naruto just waved her off with understanding, as this was the easiest way to deal with enemies in state and found it to be he decided to use a Shunshin jutsu to get around the awakened drunks before knocking them out. "That was rather boring," said Naruto as June began tying them up. Placing a seal in a tree, the two of them retreated back to town to collect the bounty before making their way back to tracking Naruto's descendant. "Not bad for someone you were just going to use as a distraction," Naruto asked with a grin as he saw the bounty hunter leans in closer to him. To this, June gave the blonde a playful smirk. "Well, I must say that you are a perfect partner, Naruto," June complimented as she saw the blonde raise his brow. "I have partnered myself with others. But I was the one who usually did the work while the other person expects payment for watching. Yeah, well, that's just the laziness of this generation. Apparently everyone wants to count on others to solve their problems for them." Just as Naruto was going to walk in the indicated direction, he found that June pinned him against the wall with a seductive smile on her face. "Allow me to show you how much I want to thank you," June said as she claimed Naruto's lips with her own. After all, she was a grown woman with needs, and since she usually worked on her own, she hadn't much time to develop romantic entanglements, only taking time off to take care of certain needs until she was back on the hunt again. A few days had passed as the original Naruto and the Foxy Vixens found themselves tracking the group known as the Kaioshin Warriors. From what Naruto had gathered from Nai and Sand, who toyed around with the Avatar's group before decided to retreat and let them go due to the arrival of a small Fire Nation scouting vessel coming into the horizon, they would be reaching Ba Sing Sea any day now. Sho continued to keeping an eye on Iroh and Zuko, the former easily tracked thanks to Iroh's precarious fondness for tea, also noted they were on their way to the Earth Nation capital, and the copy Naruto continued on his little adventure with June. "I definitely smell what can only be a woman's scent. We're not too far from their location," the blonde informed them. "Tai Li, stop squirming," they told the girl who was riding on his back piggyback style. "This is the last time you get to ride my back. But if I sit still, I can't see everything. Besides, I like riding you," she said without realizing how dirty that sounded. To her credit, it only took her a few moments to realize how that sounded before she started blushing furiously and tried to correct herself, only for her words to come out as a series of sputters. Naruto only grinned and said, "Well, if that's the case, it's only fair I get to ride you too then." He teased her, causing her face to heat up like a cherry. "Will you two quit flirting and focus on the mission?" Mai remarked, getting rather irritated. For some reason, Naruto and Tai Li's flirting was really annoying her. "Now don't worry, Mai-chan. There's room for you too." "Okay, enough with the jokes," Azula told them as she peered through a bush. "We found our prey, let's go." Suki, the leader of the Kaioshin warrior, addressed her subordinates as she emerged with the airbender's missing pet Appa. "No sudden movements, he's been lost for a while and he looks like he's hurt. He's shy around people and scared. Stay low and stay quiet. I can't believe you found the Avatar's bison. Didn't you just see the Avatar a few days ago?" one of them asked as Suki nodded. "Yes, so he probably isn't all that from here. It's our responsibility to get Appa back to him safely. This could be our most important mission yet." Turning, she leads the other girls up the rest of the way, pausing at the top of the hill. Appa notices them and rises to his feet, roaring an angry warning. "Give him some space." They back up a pace as Suki edged in closer. "Appa, it's me, Suki. I'm a friend," she said, walking toward Appa, who moaned warily. I want to help you. You're hurt. We can help you feel better. And we can help you find Ong." She cautiously placed her hand on his nose and he laid down and closed his eyes in acceptance. Appa sits among the girl warriors licking the face of one with his great tongue. Suddenly his ears twitch in response to approaching danger and as he turned about, a bolt of blue lightning fells a nearby tree. Naruto, Azula, Mai and Ty Lee walk up to the top of the hills, reining to a halt before the Kaioshin warriors. Azula held out a clump of white fur. My, you're easy to find." She tosses it aside. "It's really astounding my brother hasn't captured you yet." The Kaioshin warriors stand ready around Appa. The warriors drop as one into combat stances, unfurling war fans and collapsible shields. "What do you want with us? Who are you?" the Avatars fangirls. Azula asked them mockingly as Naruto's mouth dropped. "No fair, Azula. You stole my joke. That's the last time I tell you anything," he said with an exaggerated huff. Ty Lee thought about it for a moment and then brightened up. "Oh, I get it. Good one, Azula. If you are looking for the Avatar, you're out of luck." Mai sighs despondently. "Can we get this over with already?" Azula shrugged. "Might as well, Naruto, you stay back and watch. This time the girls and I are going to fight. All my life I wanted to see a catfight and at long last my dreams have come true." Naruto cried dramatically as he used his palm to wipe away the false tears. "Mai, remind me to hurt Naruto later. I'll probably be right there hurting him as well." Azula was the first to move, sending a blast of blue fire towards the warriors. They leap to form a shield wall in front of Appa, deflecting the fire blast. Mai and Ty Lee flip forward to engage the warriors in combat. Mai, landing on her feet, produces a brace of throwing knives from her sleeve. With a sweeping throw, she pins a startled warrior to a tree by her clothing. "You're so colorful, it's making me nauseous." Mai spins and throws a barrage of throwing arrows at a second warrior, who draws a katana and cuts them from the air. She takes a couple of swings at Ty Lee, who nimbly evades her slashes before felling her with a flurry of pressure point strikes. Even Ty Lee was getting into the spirit and taunting as she placed her hands on her hips and said, "You're not prettier than we are." Suki continues to stand between Azula and Appa, blocking her fire blasts with her shield. Azula's second more powerful blast ricocheted off Suki's shield, setting fire to the tree she had felled initially. As it catches on fire, Appa cowered back from the leaping flames. "Afraid of fire, I see. That's good, that fear is justified." Suki drew her fan. "Go, Appa. Fly away from here. Get out of here." As Appa rises to the sky, Suki charges Azula. The Fire Princess performs an amazing horizontal mid-air spin, simultaneously avoiding her thrust and sending her sword flying from her hands to embed in a tree. Suki blocks another fire blast, and then Azula counters her kick and trips Suki to the ground. Pausing at the sight of Suki in danger, Appa turns and flies back to help. Ready to finish Suki, Azula dodges beneath a pair of hurled war fans hurled at her back and turns to launch a retaliatory attack. Suki rises to her feet, rushing to wave off the approaching sky bison. Suki waves a burning branch. "Get out of here. You have to find Ong. We'll be okay." Clearly torn, Appa finally shies away and flies off into the sky. Smiling in relief, Suki barely reacts in time to block a blast of blue fire with her shield. Staggering backwards, she falls into a battle stance, unfolding her war fan. The remaining female warriors were about to intervene until Ty Lee cut them off and before they could react, she hit them with a few jabs, blocking their kai, and they fell over in surprise. Some of them stopped in surprise when they saw a few of their allies get taken down so quickly. Mai took this opportunity to strike the non-vital parts of their bodies, and they fell over as well. "This was rather boring," Mai said as she twirled a knife on her index finger while approaching Ty Lee, who was fending off the remaining girls and managed to take the rest of them down. By the time the battle was finally over with the Kaioshin warriors were bound and tied up. It's obvious why the Avatar is heading to the Earth Kingdom. The day of the Black Sun would be a perfect opportunity to attack. Even though we know we're aware of the solar eclipse, it would still be their best chance in attacking the Fire Nation and gaining an advantage if not outright ending the war. I mean, if the enemy leader loses his only mean of fighting, then this is your best chance to kill him or her at their moment of weakness. So the best bet would be to cut them off before they contacted the Earth King. Well, now for the next step of our plan. Now it's time for the three of you can take off your clothes now. Naruto stated casually, causing all three to react rather comically, a shared look of widened eyes and scarlet faces. What? They all exploded at the blonde with a furious and embarrassed look as Naruto chuckled. Have you three forgotten the purpose of this attack? Relieving them of their disguises to sneak in. He reminded them as all three, and even Azula, who remarkably enough looked more girly than she never had adored sheepish looks. Well, of course, it's just that your wording could use better. Azula remarked, trying to play off her response. It was merely our reaction of you saying that as if you were going to stand there and watch. Now no preview of the wedding night. Naruto's teasing was answered in the form of a slap to the back of his head, 3 times in fact. Very well, he said as he walked off, rubbing the back of his head. I mean, the 3 of you have lovely bodies. No need to feel embarrassed. The blonde said with a cackle as he disappeared into the woods. Being a perverted dope aside, I have to admit at least he keeps things interesting. Mai couldn't help but admit. To be honest, she was skeptical of Naruto's subtle hints of overthrowing the Fire Lord in favor of Azula taking over for Ozai, but just like before, he was softening Azula up, and she couldn't help but feel that there was more to Naruto's planning than she was able to figure out, and she couldn't wait to see what the end game was. Naruto has always proven to be an interesting person. It's like my father said, power is anything, and I'm sure he wouldn't blame me for only following his teachings and going with the strongest side. She answered, getting nods from them, and they proceeded to change into their new outfits. Naruto peacefully meditated as he looked down at the canvas of the landscape. They had stopped by a lakeshore where tank maids stopped as the strategists worked out the kinks of the invasion plan. He was not entirely alone in this place as he watching the silent beauty that was Mai wash her hair while wearing her bathing suit. The maroon top and long inferno orange skirt that showed off her arms, shoulders, and stomach. While she wasn't as bouncy as Ty Lee, she wasn't a slouch. She had a perfectly modest and average figure a teenage girl her age would have, with developing breasts and hips that were a bit prominent. To which Naruto found to be really eye-catching in his opinion as she decided to call in his winning bet. The blonde in question told her that if she was uncomfortable with doing such a thing then she didn't have to, but the said girl told him that she wanted to do this and inwardly wondered if he would like her figure. Naruto then gave a loud whistle at the girl. I need to make sure that I have this image burned in my skull. He said as adjusted his black Hakama-style pants for no particular reason. He was also wearing low black feet-fitting shoes and a shirt he had custom-made to look just like his old sage cloak because it amused him so. As he got a little closer, Mai looked up at him, startled for a minute. Which caused the blonde to grin at the stiletto-wielding warrior while doing a few stretches as his ash-gray Haori lay on the ground. So, see anything you like, Mai-chan? HMPH, I thought I was the one who would be showing off. Mai retorted as her cheeks turned bright red at seeing her teammate toned body. Boo, then a thought came to her mind in seeing him dressed differently. How come you're not wearing that black coat of yours anymore? I kind of thought it was time for a change. Naruto said while scratching the back of his head. Now that is a strange looking bird. Mai pointed out as a massive white dove flew to their sight. This caused the blonde to stand up from his seat to see the dove began to descend to their place. Interesting look, some information has been uncovered. Not too far away the Fire Princess was assessing what was happening before her eyes. The fact she was beginning to invoking a sense of loyalty from her troops that was greater than their loyalty to her father's. It's not that she was not grateful in having the support of her people, but there was a fire in her that was slowly growing different from anyone that she had known. Naruto had talked her into letting her troops help out any village they came upon. The people of the said villages initially agreed out of fear for their lives due to the nation of cruelty and ruthlessness that followed the Fire Nation army. They later changed their opinions slowly when Azula assured the people would be safe under her rule. To serve as proof of that fact in her words, she had the troops make a symbol of the Fire Nation out of hay as she burnt it down with her fire, bending only for Naruto to make a new symbol out of crystal, which took the form of a crescent moon within a red circle of flames. Azula, are you decent? Naruto asked as he creaked open the door. Naruto's voice shook her from her thoughts. You may come in. Azula said as she watched the blonde come in with his smile. Would you mind telling me why you're in such high spirits, Naruto? Which do you want, the good news or the better news? He asked. The Fire Princess then let out a smirk on her face, to which she wanted to know first. I would like to know the better news first. She said as she saw the blonde smirk at her. The wild animals that have been plaguing the creatures were hunted down. A few troops sustained injuries by a persistent saber-toothed moose lion, but nothing that won't take a day or two to heal from. They also helped the village in some of the needed reconstruction. Naruto said as he saw the girl nodded her head. With the help of one of the villagers who went along with the troops to lead them to that village. He talked with the people there and they have started to support you as a new Fire Nation. So what is the good news? She asked as she saw Naruto lean against the wall of her room. I have pinpointed the exact location of the Avatar pet and are in the process of completely estimating the defensive power of Ba Sing Se. I do know that the Avatar's group doesn't have a clue about our place and if we move quickly enough we can beat them there by a day. He said with his arms crossed. Have a plan in mind. Azula then placed her hand under her chin as she thought on this move and thought out many options on what to do with the creature. What would you do in this situation, Naruto? She asked a blonde who blinked a few times. Continue with our plan to deceive the Earth King with you as the Kaioshin warriors. Information seems rather tight-lipped, and the recent Earth King appears to have never traveled outside his own palace. Rumors of shady underdealings and movements have me believe they have a person hidden in the shadows secretly controlling Ba Sing Se with the king as a figurehead. We get our hands on him or her, we take control of the Earth military force, he chuckled to himself. Azula nodded and called for some soldiers, sending them on the errand to retrieve Ty Lee and Mai. And that's what we're dealing with basically. You three are going to have to put on a convincing performance until we ring out the ringleader. Ty Lee couldn't help but wonder if they were going in undercover, what would Naruto be doing? So what would you be doing while we're in Ba Sing Se? Naruto then made a thoughtful expression as he tapped his chin a couple of times before looking to Azula with a serious face. Remember that report one of your generals spoke of? He said with his voice sounding serious as his face, to which the Fire Princess nodded. Well, I want to go help them with those so-called freedom fighters that are just plain low-lives. But they have great numbers of earthbenders compared to the troops that are loyal to you. So you're going to go as backup for them? Azula then began to ask Naruto more about his plan, to which the blonde nodded his head. Well, I hope to hear good news when you return, and make sure my troops will be taken care of too. No problem, Haim. Naruto said before making his way where the troops were at. Tapping into Kurama's power, it took Naruto only 5 minutes to arrive at the campsite. Naruto arrived behind one tent in the camp of Azula's loyal troops stacked in her stead as he planned to gain more support for his leader. The earthbenders were strong in numbers against them in a drawn-out fight. But there were no threat to himself as he had power over the elements too. He then entered the war council, that is the large tent in the center of the camp, as he saw the soldiers looking to him with relieved looks on their face. Lord Naruto, spoke a random general. I am glad that you have arrived. But where is Princess Azula and the rest of the team that went on their own? Naruto then sat on the seat next to Azula, who was being informed of the battle plans. No one dared to say anything, as their brave princess made it known that he was allowed to sit there if she was not around. What information do you have on the enemy? Naruto asked as he looked at the generals sitting at the table. General Zhang of Azula's western archers rose up to have his say. We now know that the rebels have about 3,700 in their ranks. Spoke Zhang as he went on to say more. But now they hold the high grounds and are in their elemental fields to use earthbending as we march up any terrain. Have you found a fertile area to grow our own food supplies? Asked the Sennin. Just then another officer stood up from his seat before bowing at the stand and commander. Our men have found already started to plant some of the needed food to keep the troops fed. But there is only one problem with getting our supplies from the depot to the main camp that is here. What is it, the problem? Naruto asked as he saw the officer start to shake a bit. Are there night raids that stop the supplies that get here? No, that is not the problem, Lord Naruto. The officer replied. The problem is that it takes at least a week for the needed food and water to arrive at the main camp. Naruto then let out a heavy sigh at hearing the distance problem interfering with the battle. And you say that the freedom fighters are on the high ground, right? Alright, I want you to call all our troops back stationed in all our base to return to the main camp. I will need one person to lead me to the supply depot. Once I have arrived to get the needed supplies to have everyone rested to full strength. We shall. Naruto didn't get to finish what he was saying as someone spoke outside the war room loud enough to hear them. The rebels were spotted coming down the high ground and will soon arrive. This made the generals and top officers come out of the war room. The enemy outnumbers us greatly. The officer reported outside the tent. We only have 400 troops here as they have 2,300. It's too dangerous to risk an attack. Just then Naruto came out of the tent. Victory in battle is not won through superior numbers, Ba Sing Se, and this army defeat at the hands of the Avatar has proven that. So remember these feelings and words. Naruto shouted as he slammed the massive blade on the ground, which crushed the ground on impact. I, Uzumaki Naruto, will crush all those who oppose me. Naruto stood on the battlegrounds along with his arms crossed and his haori flapping in the wind as he sensed the rebels coming closer. 2 days had passed and he was itching for some action as his eyes scanned the entire area. Riksabakuryu. A massive amount of sand began to raise into the air, causing the forefront of the invasion to freeze in their rush and attempt to run away. The wave of sand collapsed and blanketing the first wave, leaving them trapped and helpless. The sand then burst into several streams as it formed thick blanketed walls to keep them from escaping. Soldiers, move in and take the rebels prisoners. Naruto shouted as he saw the soldiers move in on the rebels who tried to earthbend. But found that their bending hindered as the blonde used his elements of earth and water to break down the ground and soften it to mud. So they quickly surrendered to the army of Azula that held their lives. Why can't you people just leave us alone? One man shouted as he looked up to the soldiers of Azula. The moment he spoke these words to the soldiers, he saw the man was about to raise his arms to strike him, but stopped by Naruto, who gave the soldier a heated glare laced with killer intent as it made the man fall to his knees. If we had left you alone to your own devices. Naruto spoke to the prisoners who looked at him. I am very sure that you all would terrorize the neighboring village for food or steal from merchants that were traveling. I want to know what your excuse is for doing these acts. What choice do we have? Another villager cried out in a defeated tone. He was a man in 50s, one of the people who had grown up during the war, through more than one generation's time of the war. If it weren't for you Fire Nation scum, we wouldn't have to do this to survive. All we want is to live in a place without fighting and to have our children be happy. Is that too much to ask for in this world? A random woman asked. Just then a teenager stood up from the crowd as they looked at the army in front of her people. Why isn't the Avatar here to save us? The teen cried out. Hearing this made Naruto scoff at the notion of someone praying to the Avatar like a god. What if I told you people that if you pledge your loyalty to Princess Azula, I can bring you to a place of fertile land where you can live happily, tend to fields of food that can have grown, and where you can hold your family's clothes. A place where you will be under Princess Azula's protection keeping you from harm from all other outside forces. So we're to become slaves to the Fire Nation. Another rebel had yelled out with defiance in his eyes. We'd rather die than to do something as low as that. Naruto then looked at the person who said these words, as hence more outwardly recognized his presence into the person and made him fall on his knees before calming down. Are you saying that you would let your children or unborn children die for your own beliefs? He spoke as he saw a few people flinch, while a few grabbed their teen children. All that Princess Azula is asking for is your loyalty to her and not the current Fire Nation that is currently being ruled by Ozai. So I ask that you follow the soldiers to this land I speak of, and home will be ready for you to enter for the rest of your life. After saying his words to the fallen rebel earthbenders who knew they had no choice to resist agreed to Naruto. As the said blonde turned his back on the people to speak with the person who found the supply fields. When you found the fertile lands that you told me about, did you do what I asked of you? Naruto asked. The soldier nods his head at the stand-in commander who grinned at what he was going to plan next. I have done as you asked my lord. The soldier reported as he bowed his head. Alright then move out the people to meet at our supply depot. With that said. Naruto then walked behind one of their tanks so that no one would see what he is going to do next and then used the heram. Once he arrived at the supply depot by appearing behind a tree nearby in a yellow flash. He then walked into the supply base to greet the soldiers Azula's stationed to guard the vital base. Well, time to use that jutsu Yamato taught me. The blonde thought happily. Nearby Sing Si the Fire Nation princess was laying down on the bed of the special room in the tank that she ordered built for her comfort when began to show on everything that was happening around her. She then turned around on her bed as she could fire that blazed in her chest rise again. Creating my legacy that will forever be in history, huh? She thought to herself as she closed her eyes and her mind drifted back to a few months ago. Azula looked at the blonde with a curious look as he just smiled at her question. All that stuff about my father being weak you've gone on about. What are you implying? What is going on in that funny little head of yours? Azula, anyone with enough information and observation, anyone can see your father has an inferiority complex when it comes to your uncle. I believe that is the reason why he banished your brother. He most likely perceived the difference between you and Zuko as a reminder of himself and your uncle. All that power and deception means nothing when you're incapable of living as a human being. How much respect can you really gain with fear? Ruling through hatred and forcing those to serve under you in fear isn't loyalty. The moment someone would be free of you they would take it and sooner stab you in the back than go back to being under your thumb. Then tell me, how would you define a strong empire? Well, for one, I wouldn't define it with just might. I met and dealt with people who feel that power was everything and it was clear that they didn't care about people but fueling their own egos. It took many years and it being forced into my thick skull several times that one person does not make a nation. The people are what make the nation great and a nation thrives under a wise leader. The wise ruler would be beloved by their subjects, those subjects who would lay down their lives for the king or queen, lord and lady without a thought. Like the Avatar, your father is receiving praises for accomplishments he personally did not do. Countless lives of brave soldiers being sacrificed for the glory of the nation and he gets all the credit. Even you Azula. Even you are being molded into the role of pawn, working your ass off while he gets all the glory and praise. War hero, proud princess, and fire-bending master Azula would not be remembered over the over-glorification of Ozai, who alone has nearly single-handedly took the Avatar on one-on-one, a feat I am sure is impressive in itself. One whose potential allowed her to harness ember-colored flames. The one who after seizing Amashu from King Bumi did not get her due, but it was Ozai who was praised. As Azula listened to his words she couldn't find any flaw in his argument. It was true, every compliment she had been given was somehow twisted into some sort of praise for Ozai. All her hard work would be overlooked for the greater glory of her father. She tried to suppress it for so long, but she couldn't help but feel anger at the lack of recognition she had received. Just once she liked people to praise and recognize her Azula. Not just the Fire Lord's daughter, but the Fire Nation Princess Azula, who was putting her very life on the line on the battlefield for the greater glory of her nation. And if this went on, she would never go down in the history books for her accomplishments. "Follow me," he said as he took her hand and pushed the tent flap out of the way. All the soldiers were called to attention as Naruto began his speech. "I have heard words from many of you and they have disturbed me." He began as some of the soldiers nervously wondered what they did to set off the blonde. In their minds, anyone who could talk to Azula as an equal was a scary person, especially considering his penchant for friendly hugs and somehow waking up the next day alive. Rumors and jokes about the princess finally unwinding because she got herself a boy toy were sparse, except by the bravest or most foolish of soldiers of fear of her finding out and getting a lightning bolt to the nutsack. Contrary to popular belief, this was in fact not intentional and Naruto sneaking up on her and goosing the princess while she was practicing, resulting in one unfortunate soldier becoming a eunuch, and those gave birth to the rumor of the lightning sack blasting Azula. Words of Ba Sing Se's capture would be a special victory for your Fire Lord Azai. I'm afraid I have to call bullshit on that one. Naruto scoffed at the soldiers around as they gasped at his words, and some just narrowed their eyes at him. From what I see here is that if we can get through the wall, Azai would be the one accredited. Why should Azai take credit for our accomplishments on something he is not leading himself on? Mai then raised a brow at the blonde Sennin as she wanted to know where he was going with this. If that is the case, then please enlighten the rest of us. She spoke with her voice having a curious tone in it. I am sure the troops also wish to know what you mean by your words, and I do not think that some of them liked what you said. Naruto then opened his eyes as he is leaning his back against Azula's makeshift throne. Well, I fail to see where Azai should get the credit for something he has no intention of doing himself. Spoke the blonde as everyone around him listened on in interest. Now, as far as I am concerned with this matter, it's Azula who is the one who lead the operation. But I fail to see where her father fits in all the glory when he has not raised a finger as he sits in his throne. Soon everyone in the camp was now muttering voices of agreement on what the blonde said. At the same time, those that are loyal were finding themselves drawn to the blonde and found themselves questioning their loyalty to the current Fire Lord. Now I must ask you, soldiers of the Fire Nation, this one question. Naruto continued as he saw the troops with the members of Team Fire giving their complete attention to him. Who sits before us and leading to victory in our nation? I will tell you who the same person who is putting her life on the line and is doing everything she can for the glory of the Fire Nation. The same person trying to repair damaged relationships so people will come to see the Fire Nation as anything as monster and lessening the probability of an even longer war so all of your chances of returning to your loved ones increase. That person is none other than Princess Azula herself, who even confronted the Avatar himself, a feat where not even the supposed strongest firebender in the world is doing to make sure the glory of his nature. Her actions show more heart, love, and courage for her nation than the Fire Lord, so I ask that all you give your support and loyalty to the woman who will lead the Fire Nation into a prosperous new golden age. All hail Princess Azula. Azula was about to say something in return to Naruto's speech of her being a strong princess. But her calls were silenced by the voices of her troops in their support for her. All hail Princess Azula. All hail Princess Azula. After the troops under her command left to rest for the night, found that they were restless after hearing Naruto's speech. Gave everyone a new look on their crown princess as they went to train. But who would have known this night would turn a vocal point in the history books of the four nations? Naruto then turned to her and smiled. These soldiers have devoted their lives to you after hearing my speech earlier. He said as saw some of the still awakening troops raising their cups to her, then closed the flap. These men and women seen the great things you have done in the past battle and some failures as they accept that you are human. We will fight the Avatar on even ground as we slowly and surely bring those loyal to us under the fold as a new empire will be born from this war. Think about it as a harmonious unity between the nations. Not just an empire where fire rules over but a unity and understanding between the nations with you herald as one of the ones responsible for this, to be heralded as your age is more than just a princess but the more befitting title of an empress. Azula did not know what to say after hearing all the things Naruto spoke of. Somehow deep down inside her, she was well aware of the way her father kept her out of his speeches of victory. It really did make her angry as her own people just spoke of how great her father is. So what will you do now, Haim? Naruto asked as he saw the fire princess stand there, her eyes burning. Azula then took a few breaths to calm herself down before looking at Naruto and let out a seductive smile. Empress Azula, I like the sound of it already. She admitted before leaning the blonde back. But there is something else I must conquer before I start with the four nations and the Avatar. After all this time and thinking Alla had finally come to a decision. She decided it was now or never to act on her feelings. Oh, and just what is that? Naruto asked as he pretty much got his answer when Azula wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned on him. The only answer she gave the blonde was that of kissing him softly on the lips, in which he returned. However, he then started to glide his tongue along her bottom lip and wanting entrance. After a few moments the kiss broke and she whispered, "You." As Naruto grinned at her answer. "I see someone has gotten into my icha," he teased. Azula wasn't the most social of people, so her reading something like icha wasn't completely unfounded, as she wasn't able to relate or deal with most people due to Ozai's screwed up parenting. "Shut up before you ruin the mood," she said as she pressed her lips against him once more. Naruto scooped her up in his arms as their tongues fought for supremacy as they went to her room. After breaking apart for air, she went outside and told everyone to not come into her tent for any reason to disturb her from talking with Naruto. To which everyone nodded their heads, as this included her two best friends, because her strategy sent even Mai to sleep. Naruto decided that since he wasn't sure what kind of lover Azula was, he suggested they go somewhere further where they wouldn't be heard, so doing the wood release. For pillar home technique, he took out some storage scrolls and unsealed a comfortable sleeping mat for them to lay on with pillows and blankets. After he finished getting everything ready for the night with his fire princess, he turned to her as he saw Azula had let her hair down, along with her clothes being off, as she looked to the side embarrassed. She then let out a small yelp as he wrapped his arms around her figure. Azula was remarkably developed, with a soft and various rear that was toned from years of combat training, and remarkably perky breasts that was slightly larger than average. "From the moment I met you," he said with a gentle smile as he placed a hand on her cheek, in which were soon cupped by her own hand on top of his, and seemed to let out a purr. "I always thought you're beautiful, Haim," he answered as they lay down on the mat with one arm across her breast and the other covering her lower area. It was remarkably cute sight to see the confident, control, and sometimes even cold Azula looking so vulnerable. Her face began to heat up a scarlet red and seemed a little scared, a side of her he had never really seen. "Azula," he caressed her cheek and kissed her forehead. "I won't hurt you," he gently reassured her as he got up to undo his clothing. Azula blushed to the side as Naruto began removing his shirt after taking his haori off to show a well-toned torso, which resulted in Azula letting out a gasp at what she saw as he undid his samurai-style pants and his black low shoes off. Because she had never once seen one before and only had what she heard to go off of what the blonde was sporting underneath his pants, intimidating her with his semi-flaccid beep was slowly rising, and as such, she tried to calm herself and think back to the lessons one of her tutors taught her. After all, even seduction could be used as a powerful weapon in the right hands. At first she thought the woman was crazy, going on about techniques of sucking bananas without bruising them and such, and disbelieving of man having something that big in their pants, as most clothing didn't seem tailored for that detail, but seeing was believing, she suppose. Azula breathed gently as Naruto calmly walked over to the fire princess as he sat down before spreading her legs apart. However, Azula still kept her left hand over her very part of her that he needed access to. Gently placing his hand over hers, he pressed his lips against hers and gently nibbled as he moved the hand away, exposing her sex. Azula looked away, her cheeks burning as she could feel Naruto studying her body, perhaps checking for some imperfection. She briefly wondered in fear until she heard, "Perfection." Edited it out in order not to get my profile deleted. For unrated version, find it on Archive of Our Own. Azula had a smile on her face when the events of that night left her mind as she looked out the window above her bed. She had not known Naruto for a very long time, like most relationships do. By the time her mission in Ba Sing Se would be over, a new dawn would rise, and so would a new empire, one that would be remembered far better than those that came before her, as she would be the first Fire Empress in history. Naruto's suggestion proved quite fruitful, as people who weren't happy about the lack of support from the capital during Fire Nation raids only served to hurt the current Earth King's popularity. As a result, one by one small towns were falling on hard times and found themselves forced to pledge their loyalty to Azula's group, sending able-bodied workers in exchange for supplies. They also gained helpers to repair and rebuild their villages, and also servers to show that not all firebenders were murderous bastards. Now the group was now several hundred yards away from the great city of Ba Sing Se, with slightly beefed up numbers and supplies. Fire Nation tanks rumbled across the barren lands, escorting a gigantic vehicle. The titanic tunneling machine was 10 stories high and stretching back a great distance. The tanks flanking it seem as little more than insignificant toys by comparison. Large segments of the drill's body pushed forward under steam power, punching steam-driven spikes into the ground and then contracting again to gain forward movement. The great drill, a vast black iron cylinder creeping forward like a caterpillar, the tanks beside it ant-like. On a throne sat Azula with Mai and Ty Lee standing at her sides as War Minister Chin stepped forward to tell Azula of the drill's power. This drill is a feat of scientific ingenuity and raw destructive power. Once it tunnels through the wall, our troops will storm their city. The Earth Kingdom will finally fall, and you can claim Ba Sing Se in the name of your father. Nothing can stop us. Despite her face remaining impassive, Azula steadily grew annoyed at the man's incessant chatter. War Minister Ching, who was mysteriously absent during the little meeting the other night, was also fiercely loyal to her father and would have to meet with a little accident some time later. Looking away from a periscope, Ty Lee asked. What about those muscle Y guys down there? She looks back into periscope where Earth Kingdom benders were seen dropping into trenches. War Minister Ching walked up and sharply raps the periscope, startling Ty Lee. Please, the drill's metal shell is impervious to any earthbending attack. At that, Azula condescendingly remarked. Oh, I'm sure it is, War Minister Ching. But just to make sure we're on the safe side, she turned to Mai and Ty Lee. Mai, Ty Lee, mind taking out those earthbenders? I take it you two are tired of being cooped up here anyway. The two girls were momentarily stunned at the fact they were given a choice. A stark contrast in comparison to when they were recruited, so to speak. It seemed that Naruto's presence was once more bringing back the softer side of the girl that was hidden away when her mother disappeared, only to worsen when Naruto had left. Well? Yeah, sure, Ty Lee answered, realizing she hadn't answered. Whittling knives, Mai spoke with a grin. Finally, something to do. Anything I can do, my empress. For now, only Naruto uttered that title when they were alone near him in hushed whispers. Sit back and enjoy the show. She said as she waved her hand for a bit. Think of it as me asking you to take a break from gathering that information you brought back. And what if the Avatar and the others join in during the attack and defend Ba Sing Se? Just let me handle that if they come at us. She confidently replied as she relaxed in the seat. If that's what you wish, regardless, there is something I need to do. The earthbender that travels with the Avatar interests me, and I wish to see how much she has considered my offer. Elsewhere with Team Avatar at the walls of Ba Sing Se. Katara, Sokka and Toph escorting a man named Den and his family out of a rocky pass toward the base of the Great Wall. As they pause, Aang and Momo swoop into view from the direction of the wall. Aang lands before them, Momo perching on his shoulder. Aang, what are you doing here? I thought you were looking for Appa. Katara questioned the airbender in surprise. She hadn't expected to run into him so soon, seeing as how focused he was on finding Appa. I was, but something stopped me. Something big. Aang's cryptic replied, followed by him and Toph jointly bending a rock platform up the face of the wall, lifting them all upwards. Now what's so big that Appa has to wait? Sokka trailed off as the platform ascended until they reached the desired height. That. Aang pointed out as the massive machine flanked by 8 tanks on either side came into view. We made it to Ba Sing Se, and we're still not safe. No one is. Ying, another passenger they picked up, said despairingly as she huddled together with her husband. Then. What are you people doing here? Civilians aren't allowed on the wall. An earthbender guard informed them as he approached them, alerting himself to their presence. I'm the Avatar. Take me to whoever is in charge. Aang said with a determined look, but before he could answer, Naruto popped out of nowhere and kicked the guard to the far side of the area. Now Aang, I expected more of you. Naruto then used his hinge to morph into the form of Aang, shocking them. I'm the Avatar and I think that you are wrong, or I'm the Avatar and we would like your help with food. If you're going to abuse your status, might as well commit to the role, you know. He said before resuming his true form and cackled madly. Enough with the games, you know why I'm here. Show me that conviction of yours. Reacting immediately, Aang swung his staff on the ground to make a burst of wind soar at the blonde, to which he jumped out of the way of the attack with ease. Moving right to the airbender, the water tribe warrior unsheathed his boomerang and let it flew, hoping to gain an injury on the blonde, but that failed when Naruto maneuvered himself out of the way of the weapon's path. Better. They were getting better. Less hesitation in their eyes and there was more of a willingness to fight against him, but it was clear they were still holding back against him. I see some semblance of teamwork, but your group is far from being a cohesive unit. He said as he sidestepped the returning weapon, only for Aang to see an opportunity to strike the blonde by slicing an air current using his staff, which resulted in a small cut appearing on Naruto's cheek. The blonde reached up and touched his face. I guess I underestimated you. Naruto admitted with a laugh. It's funny, you know, being on the other side for once. Now I know how most of my opponents felt. I'm not going to make this easy for you, Naruto. Spoke Aang as he was joined by Sokka and a hesitant Katara with her water in the ready. I don't want to fight you, but I can't stand by and let you help the Fire Nation take over the world. Now that I know you can be hurt, and I will do all in my power to stop you. Naruto snorted in disbelief at the airbender's misplaced confidence. You think this little scratch means anything? Until you grow stronger without using the Avatar state, you still have a ways to go to even hope in being able to fight me as a peer. Naruto then looked off to the side to see 2 familiar figures rushing at the earthbenders. If he was going to speak with Toph, now was not the most opportune time. He would fall back for now. Consider this a warning. I'll only let you escape so many times. Your time grows shorter. He said as he dropped over the edge and made his way to the battlefield to get a better seat. The gang decided that they were better off not chasing the blonde and trying to contact the Earth King about the impending siege. It is an honor to welcome you to the Outer Wall, young Avatar, but your help is not needed. General Sung informed the Avatar from his desk. Not needed? Ong said in disbelief as the general nodded. Not needed? He repeated smugly. I have the situation under control. I assure you the Fire Nation cannot penetrate this wall. Many have tried to break through it, but none have succeeded. The general rises as he speaks, leading the group back out towards an open area of the wall manned by soldiers standing near large stacks of boulders. Nothing lies beyond the outer face, but barren wastes, while a patchwork of fertile fields grow behind it. What about the Dragon of the West? He got in. Toph noted, which unnerved the general. Well, technically yes. He started startled. But he was quickly expunged, he added as he became more confident. Nevertheless, that is why the city is named Ba Sing Si. It's the impenetrable city. They don't call it Na Sing Si. He replied with a belly laugh and then became serious. That means penetrable city. Yeah, thanks for the tour, but we still got the Drell problem. Not for long. He stated as he paced back to look out over wastes. To stop it, I've sent an elite platoon of earthbenders called the Terra Team. That's a good group name, very catchy. Sokka noted thoughtfully. General, but you don't understand. Not only are you dealing with Princess Azula, but an ancient warrior with powers out of this world. Ong tried to stress, but the general ignored him. Speaking of the Terra Team, they were launching their assault on the Fire Nation forces. They propelled one of the tanks into the air and then rode a surge of earth through the gap left in the tank's formation. Ready, attack. The Terra Team leader ordered. The earthbenders tried to wedge several large pillars of stone against the side of the Drell, but it shattered them effortlessly. The Terra Team barely manages to raise a defensive shield against a barrage of Mai's throwing knives. Mai and Ty Lee rappel down the side of the Drell toward them. Nimbly avoiding their earthbending attacks, Ty Lee leaps in among them and begins delivering a flurry of pressure point attacks. One by one the Terra Team dropped helplessly at her feet. We're doomed. General Sung flailed his arms in a panic after having just watched the Terra Team demolish through a telescope. Sokka slapped General hard on the face to snap the man out of his breakdown. Get a hold of yourself, man. You're right, I'm sorry. He said as he rubbed his cheek. Maybe you'd like the Avatar's help now? Sokka sarcastically asked. Meekly approaching Ong in a timid voice, General Sung pleaded for help. Yes, please. The question is, how are we gonna stop that thing? Ong wondered as the group looked over the wall at the approaching Drell. Why are you all looking at me? Sokka squawked as he realized everyone's eyes were on him. You're the idea guy. Ong noted. Complaining, Sokka voiced his thoughts. So I'm the only one who can ever come up with a plan, that's a lot of pressure. And also the complaining guy. Katara irritably added. That part I don't mind. Some time had passed as the Drell finally made contact with the wall of Ba Sing Si. Start the countdown to victory. Ching said as he prematurely began celebrating as Naruto and Azula merely watched with respective looks of boredom and even more boredom, followed by the Drell's titanic bit penetrating into the surface of the outer wall. Though, it appeared as expected things weren't going flawlessly. War Minister, an engineer, was ambushed. His schematics were stolen. A panicked voice cried through one of the speaking tubes. The War Minister looks shocked, while Azula's eyes narrow in suspicion. War Minister, a brace on the starboard side has been cut clean through. It's sabotage, sir. The War Minister is frozen in terror, watching Azula from the corners of his eyes. Azula turned from Ching to Mai and Ty Lee. Let's go, ladies. She called to her friends as she was sure just who was behind this. Meanwhile, down at the Drell's superstructure, where Ong and Katara continue their sabotage. Good work, Team Avatar. Now Ong just needs to. Sokka glances up. Duck. He ducks and covers just in time to avoid a blast of blue flame. Azula, Mai and Ty Lee ran out on another massive girder well above Ong and friends. Ong narrowly avoiding a second blast. Whoa. Wow, Azula, you were right, it is the Avatar and his friends. Ty Lee stated. You girls know what I expect. Azula stated as they took off in hot pursuit after the gong. Ty Lee drops to the bottom edge of the girder and swings out towards Ong, who throws her backwards with a gust of wind. Ong and his friends flee down corridors when Ong comes to a halt at a T intersection. Guys, get out of here, I know what I need to do. Ong said as he heads other direction with Momo. Wait. You need this water more than I do. As Ong turned, Katara drew out her flask of bending water and throws it to him. Sokka and Katara rush down a corridor while Ong and Momo head the opposite direction. The fire trio reached the intersection. Follow them, the Avatar is mine. Azula ordered as she raced off after Ong, while Mai and Ty Lee pursued the others. Katara and Sokka reached a dead end with a large hatch marked by a sign written in kanji. Slurry pipelines, what does that mean? Katara wondered as Sokka struggled with the hatch. After finally opening the hatch, he peers into it with Katara. It's rock and water mixed together, it means our way out. As Katara began lowering herself into the slurry pipe, Mai and Ty Lee suddenly arrived on the scene. Katara lets go and plunges in, followed by Sokka, just as Mai's throwing knives ricochet off the open slurry hatch. Both splash into the slurry neck deep and are quickly swept away by the current. Cut back to Mai looking down into the slurry flow. Ugh, disgusting. A completely revolted Mai said as she peered down at the slurry sludge. Ty Lee peers down and reluctantly urged Mai on. Come on, you heard Azula. We have to follow them. She can shoot all the lightning she wants at me. I am not going in that wall sludge juice. Mai shuddered as Ty Lee hops down into the slurry flow, sending up a great splash that narrowly misses Mai. With a final expression of disgust, Mai slams closed the slurry hatch. Up above, Aang races through the drill's engineering section with air-bending speed, past engineers who barely detect him through their respirator masks. Aang finally races up a long ladder toward the drill surface. Outside the drill, a large pool of slurry starting to form at its rear. Screaming with fear, Sokka and Katara ride the cascade of slurry out the rear spout of the drill, sliding to a halt in the grayish ooze. Sokka tries to wipe the revolting stuff off of his tongue, pounds his fists into the slurry in disgust. Ty Lee emerges from pipe exhaust, riding waist deep in the slurry flow, with a look of wicked anticipation on her face. When she was suddenly snatched up, she let out a squeak. Dropping down not too far away, Ty Lee was levitated quite a distance away by Naruto. You're going to need a thorough scrubbing. The faster we get you in a bath the better, Naruto remarked. Up above on the drill, Aang and Momo raced across the upper hull. This looks like a good spot, Momo. He glances up and barely avoids the large boulder that bounces off where he was standing. Ag. He dodges a second and third boulder as they continue to rain down from above. General Sung, tell your soldiers to stop shooting rocks down here. Aang shouted up. General Sung looks down from a great height, he apparently doesn't hear. Soldiers, whatever you do, don't stop shooting rocks down there. Sung draws his hands up to his face in distress, while the row of benders next to him release another volley of boulders. Below, Aang vaults past this new wave of stones and as he lands, begins rapidly scything the surface of the drill with the water Katara gave to him. At its rear, Katara continues to block the pipe's exhaust with a slurry ball. Good technique, little sister. Keep it up. Don't forget to breathe. Sokka told her in a lecturing tone. You know, I am just about sick and tired of you telling me what to do all day. Katara snapped as she began losing her temper. You're like a chattering hog monkey. Just bend the slurry, woman. Katara bends up a rush of slurry with her free hand, launching him up to plunge back down into the foul muck. Emerging from beneath the drill was none other than Toph, who had just finished wreaking all sorts of heinous havoc. You guys need some help. Toph, help me plug up this drain. Bracing her muddy legs, she coordinates with Katara, driving the slurry plug even further up the pipe. Inside the drill, the slurry pipe system begin to buckle and swell under the pressure. On top of the drill, Aang continues to rapidly cut away at the outer hull in an X pattern. What I'd give to be a metal bender. He mumbled to himself, winded. Momo, perched on Aang's shoulder, turns and give out a warning cry, allowing Aang to turn and deflect a deadly blast of blue fire. Momo narrowly avoids the flame. Momo, get out of here. Momo flies off as Aang assumes a stance. Well, Avatar, it looks like it's just you and me. The princess confidently remarked as she moved into a fighting stance. There is no escape and your friends won't be saving you this time. Now be the first to bow before the empress. She finished as a nowhere near as confident Aang moved into a fighting stance as he ready to face the only other person besides Naruto he fought in battle he wasn't sure he could defeat with certainty or easily escape from. Azula began by launching a ball of fire at Aang, who ducks and simultaneously sends an arc of wind towards her. Leaping over the wind blast, Azula once again attacks, but was forced to counter a rapid series of water whips that keep slapping away her attack gestures. Leaping into the air, Azula delivered a pair of flying fire, bending kicks that completely vaporized the water Aang was bending, sending him spinning back. As a result, she was prevented from pressing the attack. However, another barrage of boulders fell from above, forcing both of them to dodge. Aang caught one of the boulders with bending, sending it hurtling at Azula, who fell into a split to avoid it, rises, and launched another fire blast. Aang earth bends pieces of debris into a protective wall, then punched chunks of it toward Azula. Picking them out of the air, she launched a sweeping counter blast which barely misses Aang's head, who responded by punching an even larger chunk towards her. Vaulting into the air, Azula executed an incredible forward spinning double kick fire blast, obliterating his defensive wall and hurtling him backwards to slam against the outer wall. Readying another attack, Azula pauses as she sees the Avatar drop to his knees and slump forward unconscious. Azula is jarred by the forward advance of the drill as it begins bursting through the other side of the outer wall. Aang is slowly pulled underneath the wall's exterior by the forward progress of the drill. Azula grabbed him by the back of his collar and presses him upright against the wall. Aang slowly begins to rouse as Azula prepares to deliver the last blow. Aang's eyes snap open in alarm, then his right hand cracking open the surface of the wall and surrounding itself with a mitt of broken rock. He caught Azula's fire punch in the rock mitt and shoved her far back with it, her steel-shod boots sparking against the drill's hull. Aang struck a defiant earth-bending stance as Azula charges towards him, both hands ablaze. The battle is suddenly interrupted by a blast of slurry that erupts at the point where the drill meets the wall, throwing Aang from his feet before surging out to crash against the onrushing fire princess. Aang flails about trying to regain his feet and just manages to make it to his knees before Azula, arms windmilling, skates helplessly through the slop to send them both careening into the wall. Knocked momentarily senseless, they both slide face first through the slurry and away from the wall, diverging to slip down opposite sides of the drill. Recovering, Azula tries to stop her descent using her hands and feet, her steel-toed boot sparking. She managed to stop herself midway down the side of the drill, clutching at it precariously. Aang meanwhile slides down his back, his rock mitt breaking apart as he tries to stop himself with it. Aang found himself being rescued by Momo, swooping down, catching the back of his collar and pulling him upright so that he can use his swift running technique to regain the top of the drill. Aang leaps back on the back of the drill and Momo settles on his shoulder. "Thanks Momo, I owe you one," Aang said, scratching Momo's head. Aang walks along the drill's back, through the slurry mess, to stop at the X cut into the plating. "Now all I need is a boulder crashes down startling him. Actually, that is what I needed for once." Bending the boulder around to the incision, he began doing a series of sweeping earth-bending moves, each one slicing away a large chunk of the boulder. Eventually he was left with a large stone spike pointed down into the breach. Aang drops back, falls into a sprinter's stance and starts running toward the wall. Nearing it, he bends up a bowl of air and leaps atop it, riding up the sheer face of the outer wall. As he rockets up the wall the ball dissipates and Aang begins to run up the vertical face. With a powerful shout Aang completes his turn and wind sprints down at a fantastic speed. Meanwhile, Azula having finally crawled back up to the top of the drill, spots Aang streaking down face of the wall. With a shout, Aang leaped free of the wall and plunges down as Azula prepares a potent blast to intercept him. Her attack passes just over Aang's head as he strikes the spike with incredible force. The resulting explosion had forced her back as she could only watch as the superstructure of the drill was weakened as the beams begin to shear in half as torrents of slurry rushed past. Azula recovered and continued her attack with a series of flaming pinwheels. Her attacks were ceased by the sudden ascension of an earth wall. Dozens of earthbenders began making their rope descent down the wall and the Avatar's friends were running over to assist him. Azula realized the situation turned from her favor and retreated. Without having needing to give the order the Fire Nation soldiers who were capable of fighting began firing streams to cover the princess and their fellow soldiers as they began dragging out the bodies of the soldiers that were injured from the tank's destruction. That evening Naruto and the angels were conversing. After this little setback the Avatar, his friends, and the Earth Kingdom will now allow their guard to be slightly relaxed at this minuscule win and won't suspect an infiltration tactic. What adds to our advantage is the fact that they are young and inexperienced, which brings about a certain naivety. 2. With the exception of the Avatar, it seems none of them have been outside of their own home village, so they wouldn't have much experience with espionage, so maneuvering around them won't take much effort. Right, we have to get into those irritating outfits and pass ourselves off as the Kaioshin warriors, right? An annoyed Mai asked. Yes, but we have someone who can clue us in on that. Naruto answered Mai's question, referring to the Kaioshin warrior leader. While the rest were being held in a prisoner where a few summons of his were stationed to prevent anything unsightly from happening, Suki was kept in their custody for interrogation purposes and such. That Suki girl has interacted with the Avatar and furthermore can teach you three how to pull off the impersonations, it's just a matter of extracting the information from her. But do we have that sort of time? As we speak now the Avatar could be on his way to tell the Earth King of the solar eclipse. If whoever this mastermind is was able to keep the current king unaware about the war, I'm sure he can keep a handful of kids busy for a couple of weeks. So we should take the time we have to make sure you three can pass off as convincing Kaioshin warriors, but for me to train you as well. I've made some progress into my research of introducing chakra into the bodies of non-chakra users, but despite all my research, it remains that only non-benders can undergo the process. This was of course an explanation Naruto had given Azula before years prior. She had wanted to know why he had chosen Mai for his student instead of a bending prodigy. It had to deal with Kai and how introducing chakra introduced a disruption of sorts. Firebending requires breath control and focus, and as such trying to utilize jutsu as a firebender would result in them having to deal with trying to perfect and use two different types of breath control at the same time, one they spent years mastering, and one that is recently introduced and would conflict with the other one. In best case scenario, one would have to probably relearn bending all over again as their body readjusts to their body physiology, becoming accustoming to my chakra, as my chakra is anything but normal. While he could not gift her with chakra, there was nothing that stopped him from teaching her to jutsu kata. That along with stealth would make her quite deadly. Elsewhere in the Earth Kingdom, the fourth of Naruto's quasi-clones Yan and Jun had taken refuge in a forest. The trail for Xian's descendant had grown increasingly difficult to follow as the movements became sporadic. Letting out a yawn, Naruto got up and looked over at the sleeping bounty hunter. She looked so peaceful as she lay there, resting in her sleeping bag. The rustling of something caught Naruto's attention as he unzipped the zipper of the sleeping bag and stepped outside. The campfire was still burning, but not as bright as before, and Nyla was resting peacefully, her belly rising and falling in match with her breathing. Naruto took a whiff of the area as he tried to smell out whatever was in the area. The burning smell of vegetation and roots, Nyla, and even Jun's scent were among the smells that filled the area. Inhaling a few more times, he focused his ear until he focused in on a particular smell. What the hell is that? He wondered as he moved away from the campsite a few more steps so he could get a better sense of the smell. Snake. No, it's almost snake but different. His thoughts were interrupted as he felt a pair of arms and a buxom chest pressed into his back. What are you doing out here? Are we in danger of an ambush or something? Jun asked as Naruto shook his head. No, I thought I smelled something. He said as he craned his head sideways to look at her. Let's head back to bed. We have more ground to cover tomorrow. He suggested as he and Jun went back to camp. For a brief moment a singular eye popped out of the foliage, its glare yellow, and its lid color orange and slit before it disappeared back into the darkness of the forest. Before Jun found herself in Naruto's employ, she had fallen on hard times. Business had grown slow with the fall of Amashu and several neighboring towns, becoming Fire Nation territory. As a result, a large percentage of her clientele became inaccessible to her. With Ba Sing Se as the only safe haven left, with the Northern Water Tribe being the only exception, people everywhere were in a panic. Focus was being put on preparing defenses against the Fire Nation or running, meaning bounties were the last thing on anyone's mind. The only potential clients left were small villages, which could hardly scrape up money for a bounty let alone survive, and the capital of the Earth Kingdom, Ba Sing Se. Considering money for supplies and the distance traveled, ignoring the fact Jun really liked to pamper herself despite her appearance and rather gruff attitude, the money Naruto paid her would probably keep her content for a couple of months at best. So seeing that it was the next morning, it was time to begin the search again. Jun was already in the saddle, waiting for Naruto to join her. The young man hopped up and landed behind Jun without any great pomp, his hands nestling around her waist. Go Nyla. Jun said softly, urged on the shirshu, one hand on the reins and the other on the horn of the saddle. Nyla reared its hind legs before taking off at full gallop. They traveled fast, but dawn broke before they reached their destination. Jun pulled Nyla to a standstill, leaping off the beast and watching as her companion did the same. Naruto gave the shirshu a loving stroke that had become quite familiar with the blonde. The creature snuffled and purred as Naruto continued to stroke her for a few moments before the beast darted off in search of water and food. Jun settled down against a tree trunk as Naruto went about setting up a fire. I'm beginning to think this seer of yours is giving us the runaround. Jun remarked as Naruto just chuckled. We'll get to her eventually, that much I'm sure, so don't worry. Or is my company that bothersome? He asked as Jun snorted in an unladylike manner. You make a good meal and save a girl a few bucks on campfire supplies. I can deal with your presence for a few weeks. She answered his question with that sarcastic wit. They've been traveling together for weeks, and during this time, Jun had spent more time thinking about this single man than any other. He seemed quite energetic and reserved as well. He was confident and a gentleman despite innuendo-laden jokes he seemed to crack every now and then. Though, he was more of a very energetic flirt who seemed able to understand both meanings of no. Something that tend to develop in long-lived lovers or in men who had been married for quite a while. Whether or not the blonde had been married in the past, Jun wasn't sure. She never asked much about his past. It didn't hurt that he was a fantastic lover who for all intents and purposes was energetic and normal. With oddly enough seemed to be a rare traits as the years went on. He also didn't look down at her like some snooty and condescending noble or thought of her as some cheap hooker. He could at least hold an intelligent conversation with her without the topic degrading into something else. In fact, whenever he brought up a dialogue about war and peace or the applications of true unity between the nations, Jun had to admit those kind of suggestions were a bit above her head. Maybe it was his eyes that did it. That he didn't leer at her and tried to press on into intimate things without permission. Something that occurred regularly because she was beautiful, something she was aware of and took advantage in during several of her bounties. He was a nice guy, but with such an odd balance to him. He could be a bit loud or impulsive at times, but despite his negative traits they were endearing in an odd way. He had all this power yet he seemed to be pretty humble. June could count on hand the number of people who wouldn't have went mad with power and would have been quick to take over the Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation. He was an enigma in an unorthodox relationship, and he just seemed so harmless when he was a playful mood despite evidence proving otherwise. And June couldn't help but be intrigued in trying to solve the puzzle that was Naruto. We're getting close to a pretty well-established village. The person we're looking should be pretty close. But Naruto responded as the fire finally got started. A change of clothes would be nice. Considering the money I've given you, June, you could get yourself a few outfits. So what are you trying to say? She asked with a menacing look and flare of her nostrils at what she assumed was a slight by the blonde. Nothing unlike the way you're thinking. Brown and black looks good on you, but I was just thinking you might like to go with green or something, but whatever you decide, it's your choice. He answered. Whatever you say, June responded to Naruto's comment. You could be a bit of a nut sometimes. He could have probably killed her in the blink of an eye, but when she started to get angry he began to cower. He was just odd like that. Yeah, well, you're beautiful. He cheekily remarked. The pale-skinned bounty hunter rested her chin in her hand as she rolled her eyes. Just shut up and go get dinner started. Have to start the fire and now go get the food. Thought I was employing you. He cheekily remarked. If you think you can deal with my cooking, then eat at your own risk. I'm not liable for any of your medical bills. Dinner that night was a fox antelope that Naruto liberated from some hunters. The meal had been quiet until Naruto struck up another conversation. Have you ever fallen in love, June? Me? Women like me don't fall in love. We get comfortable with the situation and sometimes those choices lead to misery. She calculatedly responded to his question. She took out a large chunk of the fox antelope. And what type of woman is that? He asked as June swallowed down the chunk of meat. Aggressive. As you can see, I'm not housewife material. Not every woman is fit for the role of a housewife. Anko, one of the people from my past, taught me that. He began with a reflective smile formed on his face. Seems like you had a lot of strong female influences in your life. She remarked as Nyla nuzzled against her arm. A very wise man once told me a true ladies' man isn't a guy who can seduce countless women, but a man with a good heart and quality, so he could be any ladies' man. She laughs, genuinely amused at Naruto's statement. That's actually a pretty good sentiment. So you think you could be my type? It depends on you, give and take. Can I be any more your type, then you are mine. Naruto asked as a Cheshire grin formed on his face which invoked something of a knowing smirk and lustful grin from June. Well, how do you feel about erotic whip play? They had rented a hotel room, posing as a newlywed married couple. The town was one of those close-knit community types with bratty kids, nosy ninnies, and that overly friendly type that wanted to show any newcomer about their little town. The arrangement was her idea to both his and her own surprise. Maybe it was to stave off unwanted advantages, but something told her it wouldn't be completely foolproof, or maybe June wanted to entertain the idea of a single-person tryst. Struggling with such a thought was not a usual part of her character. As her father once told her, your decisions must be rolled with your mind, not your heart. That was rule number 1. Examine everything with a cold, calculate indifference with the result, the payload at the end of a job being in mind upon completion. There were cons to being with him, of course. For one, June couldn't trust a blonde wouldn't try to turn her into a housewife, and there was the sharing him aspect. Love had always been a foreign subject to June, so just being one of many pretty faces in a man's collection was not part of her agenda. On the other hand, he was kind, loving, loyal and very truthful. June couldn't think of a man who would willingly admit to being in the type of relationship he was in when he had the money and charisma to wrap a woman around his finger without said woman being able to easily find the other women. Experienced, was a good lay, handsome, rich, loyal, loving, and he got along well with Nyla. Then again, he could be a bit aloof at times, a bit perverted, stuck out like a sore thumb. Okay if she had to admit she was trying to invent cons now. Things were slowly forming from just another business arrangement into something more, and that got June starting to think about what she wanted for the rest of her life. She was still plenty young and could go along this line of work for another decade or so, but then what? Would she continue on alone, only inviting men to her bed for her own comfort? To satisfy urges and to cut them loose as she continued her lone journey on the road. June did know one thing though. If Naruto kept on consistently using that tongue trick of his, she might just take him up on his offer of joining this little family he was building. The gang was given a small 4-bedroom apartment to stay in due to their efforts of protecting Boss INC from the Fire Nation invasion. For the past few days that had been given the runaround. That much Naruto was able to pick up by shadowing them while keeping care to move outside of the earthbender's ability to detect. Sure enough, there was a man by the name of Long Feng pulling the strings, one that completely blew off the gang's information about the solar eclipse, which makes things all the more easier. It was rather easy with Nai and San doing some simple scouting. They were able to get a beat on the city's elite known as the Dai Li, with Sho keeping track of Zuko and Iroh's location, and by the extension the freedom fighters. It was all too easy. Mainly because his abilities were still nothing more than rumors, mainly inaccurate stories told among troops like an urban legend, and the only ones who had any real knowledge of his abilities were on his side, or like the gang were being given the ring around. The rustling of movement below alerted Naruto to the inhabitants of being awake. Inside the house, the inhabitants were getting ready for the day. An was shaving his head, Sokka's cutting off a few hairs growing above his lip with the end of his machete, despite the fact how nasty that was, her infection could have ended up on his face if his weapon wasn't probably cleaned. In the other bathroom, Katara was fixing her hair loops. Once they were in place, she smiled. Though in another dark room was Toph, her hair a horrible mess, lays face down on her bed, her blanket sloppily laying over her. A sliver of light cuts through the darkness as the door opens. Katara enters the room and gasps at the sight. Huh. Toph, aren't you gonna to get ready for the day? Toph whips her head, shooting up, causing her wild bedhead hair to fly about. She quickly spits a large loggy into a nearby spittoon which spins upon impact. Katara looked on in shock as Toph got up to her feet and brushes a large amount of dust off her sleeping shirt. I'm ready. You're not gonna wash up, you've got a little dirt on your everywhere actually, she said, her face forming into a grimace. You call it dirt? I call it a healthy coating of earth. You know what we need a girl's day out. Do I have to? Toph asked with a groan, feeling that the day was going to be a pain in the ass. It'll be fun, Katara assured her. Toph and Katara journeyed to a large building, decorated with pictures of flowers and plants. Fancy dressed women in beautiful robes walk out and smile at each other. The Fancy Lady Day Spa sounds like my kind of place, Toph remarked after Katara read off the name of the place. Are you ready for some serious pampering? Sure Katara, whatever you say. As long as they don't touch my feet, she said as her head hung low. She was still a bit hesitant about the thing. Sure enough, Toph found that she had to stifle unladylike grunts as she was held back by an attendant, while the other foot attendants were hard at work trying to scrape the massive amounts of dirt off her feet. Though, Toph's patience wore thin as the spa was suddenly enveloped in an explosion of dust erupted as Toph just performed some earth bending out of annoyance. Sometime later, Toph and Katara took mud baths, with mud covering their faces in a mask, cucumber slices over their eyes, and their heads wrapped in towels. An attendant with arms full of fresh towels walked over to Toph. Toph breathes in and exhales, which is apparently some form of earth bending, as the mud on her face begins to move strangely and creating a scary appearance. The attendant, having seen this, screams and runs off. Katara and Toph laugh as the mud around Toph's mouth forms a large goofy smile. After a few more treatments, the relaxed and clean girls exited the spa. Well, that wasn't so bad. I'm not usually into that stuff, but I actually feel girly, she said, referring to the makeup on her face and her hair that usually hung to cover her forehead were now combed back behind her ears. I'm glad, it's about time we did something fun together, Katara responded as the two of them cross a stone bridge over a creek. As they do, they pass three girls going the other direction wearing fancy dresses and robes, one sporting a fashionable umbrella. Wow, great makeup, the first of the girls said. Thanks, Toph replied, her confidence being boosted for a moment and feeling normal for once, but the boost of self-esteem didn't last long. For a clown, the snooty girl replied. Toph's face dropped into a frown as a result of the mean remark as she and Katara stopped. Don't listen to them, let's just keep walking, Katara said, urging on the earthbender who was struggling to keep her cool. I think she looks cute. Like that time we put that sweater on your pet poodle monkey, the second of the three girls remarked. That one, star, the third one added as the girls continued to chortle. Let's go Toph. No, that was a good one. Like your poodle monkey, haha. You know what else is a good one? Toph pounded the ground once, causing dust to rumble up as her earthbending traveled along the ground across the bridge to where the girls stood. A hole opens up in the stone bridge where Toph's earthbending reaches them and all three fall through into the creek with a shriek. Now that was funny, Katara added as with one move of her arm, Katara water bends a huge wave that sweeps the girls away and downstream as they scream. By the time they were through, Toph was walking away from the bridge as Katara jogs to catch up. Those girls don't know what they're talking about. It's okay. One of the good things about being blind is I don't have to waste my time worrying about appearances. Despite the comment, a frown was on Toph's face. I don't care what I look like. I'm not looking for anyone's approval. I know who I am. They both came to a stop. That's what I really admire about you, Toph. You're so strong and confident and self-assured. And I know it doesn't matter, but you're really pretty. I am? Toph asked with a smile. Yeah. You are. Katara assured her as they continue walking. I'd return the compliment, but I have no idea what you look like. Toph responded, which resulted in Katara laughing. Thank you, Katara. She punches her in the shoulder in a friendly way. Ow. I have to agree, you really are a beauty, Toph Beifong. I was wondering when you were going to show up. Toph remarked as she and Katara turned to face Naruto, who was leaning against a wall. They didn't even bother getting into fighting positions as there were people walking up and down the streets and would be drawn into the conflict if they did. So what do you want now? Katara bitterly asked, only to be startled by Naruto suddenly popping up between them. I just came to chat. I'm curious about a few things. Naruto said as he made his way over to Toph, who shifted uncomfortably. Even if she couldn't actually see it, she could feel his gaze upon her. Very lovely, you know you should let me take you out tonight. He said as both girls' eyes widened in surprise. What? She asked and furrowed her eyebrows. What are you up to? She asked as suspicion laced her voice. Nothing, he replied with a snort. Can't a guy ask a girl out on a date? Not when that guy is asking you out on a date in the city he's trying to help take over. She said as she looked around to see if anyone was taking note of what was said, but they went about their daily lives, talk about being apathetic. Ow, don't be that way. He said as he took a few steps back, his hands folded behind his arms. So you rejoined the group after that big blowout. I'm sort of curious about why, if you don't mind me asking. If you must know, I'm not a natural survivor in a sense, okay, she admitted with a huff and crossed her arms. Toph didn't really feel in the mood to really fight with someone, and seeing as Naruto remained silent, as if urging her on, she sighed and elaborated more. I might be able to fight and fend for myself, but I don't know much about cooking, and it wasn't like when I came on this little trip, I brought any money to pay for things or items to barter. I'm not a fisher or a hunter, and I really can't see plants, so I can't rely on eating those as well. Also, while I like sticking to the ground, I can only walk or earthbend so far. While my parents may have coddled me, they did realize a blind wife wouldn't be that much of a prize, but one with knowledge of worldly things that didn't need sight to know about it would make things a bit easier. Survival instinct, Naruto noted. Wise choice. At that moment Katara cleared her throat as to remind them that she was still there. Oh, I'm sorry, Katara. Did you want to go out for dinner as well? The cheeky blonde asked with a grin as Katara went flush for a moment but composed herself. No, you're not my type. She said with a dismissive hand way. While Naruto was attractive, he was too much of a flirt for her taste. She also felt that his betrayal was something she couldn't put behind her. She had no way of knowing if Naruto was sincere and could be truly trusted, and if he wasn't, she prayed that Toph wouldn't be pulled into something that would hurt her. Oh well, can't blame a guy for trying. He said with a shrug of his shoulders. He then pulled out and handed 2 blank parchments to Toph. If you wish to take up my offer for dinner, then rip up this parchment. He said, giving her the longer of the 2. It'll bring you right to where I'm at, so you don't have to worry about directions or anything. The shorter one will materialize a dress about your size. My keen eye should have been right in this situation. He said as Toph took the cards and grinned. I hope you know what you're in for, Sky Guy, because I'm not one of those dainty salad-eating chicks. I can pack 'em away. She replied with a smirk. She was also thankful that he remembered that she was blind and didn't give him written directions or anything. Is that my nickname? He continued on as Toph shrugged. It's a placeholder until I come up with something else. She said as she sensed him turn to Katara. Lady Katara. He said with a bow. I bid you good day. He said as he turned back to Toph. And I'm really hoping to see you later, Toph-chan. He said as he took her hand and placed a kiss on it before making an exit in a bright flash. It was at that moment Toph and Katara concluded the blonde must have used one of his abilities, as the civilians didn't so much as blank as a result of him exit. While Katara still wasn't easy about the situation, she knew how stubborn Toph was, and the fact she agreed to this little date was the most surprising thing at all. That and it gave her an excuse to dress up Toph for more sisterly bonding. She gathered up Toph's long sheets of ebony hair, which took an hour worth of rinsing, cleaning and shampooing, not made easy by the earthbender, and pulled it back and formed into a bond. Toph's hair was beautiful, the raven hair was shiny and really complemented Toph's skin shade. Ooh. I feel so weird. Why do girls paint themselves up with all this stuff? Seems so pointless. And despite all the complaints the snarky girl had shot out, she knew that it was Toph's way of dealing with things she wasn't used to. And who likes the smell of this perfume stuff? It's nothing but water, flowers, and stink. How doesn't anyone not gag at the smell of it? Toph was hiding her nervousness behind the complaints. She never thought that she would find herself on a date with a guy. She could have tried to prove why a dozen different ways, but she knew she would just be lying to herself. But the reason she was agreeing to this outing was for once she wanted to feel like a regular girl and to finally give Naruto to the answer of his proposition. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.